Hello, everyone. My name is Mark from the Misplay Podcast, and you're listening to Eternal Journey, everyone's favorite Eternal podcast.
Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
Greetings, all my knights and Puntawans. You are listening to Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I'm your host, Jedi. This is episode 106 of the podcast, where we have a twofer for you. That's right. We have our team captain, IPlongno, on the mic, as well as our good old friends I'll introduce here in a moment. And we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks for the latest iteration of the Empire, I don't know why I keep wanting to say Empire of Glass draft format, as well as an interview with the latest Open champion, Watchwolf92. But without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our friends, starting off with, once again, the aforementioned team captain, IPlongno. Welcome on the show, buddy.
Hello, Jedi. Nice to be back.
Always glad to have you, friend. Sitting across from him on the internet, midway around the world, is John Holio. How's the weather up where you're at, buddy?
Pretty nice this weekend. Everything's going well. Draft preparation underway. Let's get these listeners prepared as well.
Awesome. And then finally, rounding off this trifecta of draft all-stars is our very own day 2 cherry poppin' animal that just went in there with aggro, smashing it, ready to take that aggression into the next Open, is Darth Herman 2. What's up, friend?
What's up, guys? How's it going?
Feel like that was a little bit of a letdown for the build-up I gave you. But I guess that's fine.
I'm doing great. I lost to the guy that you interview here.
I mean, that's kind of our thing, right?
Right? I mean, at least I lost to the person that went all the way, right? So that's pretty cool. And we had a team member make it to top 4. I'm sure we'll discuss that a little bit as well. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here, Jedi. Very excited.
There you go. That feels so much better. Yeah, I guess my bad. I forgot that we recorded on Saturday, and so we knew that IP made day 2. But yeah, IP, congratulations on making top 4, buddy. Great job as well. Leading tip of the spear there. I guess since we're gonna avoid the pack one pick one today because we have a lot to talk about, and like I said, it's a twofer. Real quick, man, congratulations. Good job, dude. Anything you want to bring up about the tournament other than being awesome?
I'm not awesome. I don't know why. Special thanks and a shout out to Always Face, that he was the one that said that I should just go soldiers and ham it out against the rest of the field. I really wasn't. I didn't really have any chosen deck for the format. I was juggling through 4 decks before the Open started, and it's I saw Always Face had a good record on ladder. It's what did you bring? Soldiers. What? I thought we gave up on this. No, I'm playing it, and I'm having a good record with it. So okay, let's try it out. I just jammed a few games in, and then just started the Open. It was already the Open started 1 a.m. for me, so I was kind of groggy. I was just I was just being I don't even know what happened there, man. The only thing that I remembered was I started my record was 3-4. Then I just won the rest of the games, aside from being team killed twice by Alexandros Gray and Robot Jellyfish. But in the end, I made day 2, and what happened? What was catched by coverage was how I played the games out, and I was really happy with how it came to be. I just need one more top 4 finish to get an invite to Worlds, so I'm happy about that.
I feel like you're misinterpreting team kill because you made it to top 4. So I feel like it was more like a team trip or a team fumble, something like that. Maybe they bumped into you, but I mean, you made it top 4, so I feel like it's all right. But John, I think I figured out what my mistake is now for these tournaments. See, I feel like I need to pick a deck and make a ton of reps with the deck So I know the matchups, I know the interactions, the key points that I'm focusing on, and the ins and outs of the decks to trim on like think tank time. And clearly I must be wrong, because I feel like every person that's a good player that wins that we interview on the show is like, I wasn't sure what to play till the day of, and I just kind of went with something, and hey, it worked out. So I clearly found the leak in my game.
It also just goes to show you that I think luck is a factor, right?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because Watchwolf mentioned something. Actually, I don't remember if that made the podcast or not. We were talking for like 3 minutes before the interview. I'm like, stop. We're talking about interview stuff. Let's just start recording.
Right? Isn't that always the way?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's go ahead. Thank you again, IP, for the little insight. And congratulations again to both of you. I think it was a fantastic job, as well as the rest of EternalJourney that made it. We had, 5 guys total, right? Make day 2? Sick.
Yeah, 5 guys total.
So we're all 5 on the fantasy league draft team?
4 of us were. Ash.
Okay, fair.
Ash was 1 win and in away from day 2. But
enough.
Alex, I was surprised that Alex made day 2 on his first constructed open. Congrats!
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge achievement, man.
Well, I succeeded in changing decks at the very last minute, so I think that's what helped me succeed there.
Oh, another
Boom,
one
there you
with
go.
that tip, huh? Okay.
That's the trick, man. Now we know what it is. All right, that's it. I'm totally prepping for the next one that way. Crap, it's limited. Shoot. All right, never mind.
Well, it's just inherent to the tournament. Then you just make your deck right before you play it.
Yeah, because apparently the first deck that I make in this format, you and IP think I did wrong. So I'm off to a great start. I finally all right, fine. Let me just embrace the multicolor thing that everyone else on the podcast is doing.
No, that was
and I'm drafting, fixing aggressively. I even have the discipline of cutting my 3 influence card. I have literally 2 cards that are 2 influence. Everything else is 1. And then I get on this call and you guys are like, so that deck though. I was like,
Yeah.
that's it. I'm out.
You hate to see it, but of course, it's like brand new draft format the moment we release information about the last one, right? Like,
okay, so with that being said, quick shout out, a small tangent. I'm not gonna do all the housekeeping stuff, but once again, shout out to all the great people that tune into the Twitch channel as well as listen to this podcast. Really do appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for the ongoing support. It really means a lot. I don't want to admit that because it's important. Okay, so back on topic. Let's go ahead and start it. So let's start it with you, John, since I feel, or actually IP, you've jammed a lot of games being in the future. You've jammed a ton of games. I know we had bot drafts finally end it today, but looking at the team channel, we've had quite a bit of success in this format already. So let's start off with the most basic thing, since we just got off of the, oh yeah, I looked and I didn't realize it. Farm Eternal did a 5-color podcast too. I didn't even notice, so I was like, great. I came into the podcast.
I mean, that's just how the format was, right?
I know, but I just thought it was funny because I'm like, all right, we're gonna talk synergies, and you and Alex are like, dude, what synergy? This is just straight 5-color. So I'm like, all right, fine, Audible, we're talking about 5-color. Yeah. And then I look and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I think Friends of Eternal has a 5-color relevant topic as well. So all right. Anywho, so IP, start us off. How viable are the 3 and 4 faction decks? I don't think anyone said they were doing 5-color, I think is what we concluded last episode. But anywho, where are you at there? And let's use that as a springboard into the conversation.
I think right now with the format changes, like you get back 1 Empire of Glass again. So you need to just pick the strongest cards in that, and like try to know which 2 factions you'll be on in that pack. So with being tricolor, I could even say that you could be like a 2 strong color, then splashing colors, splashing really strong colors in your deck. So one of those strong splashable things are Changey Stick or Splashy Stick, Metal Fang, Martial Efficiency. Like those are really strong cards that you can just splash them in. What else? I guess You can also splash in Nectar of Unlife. I think that's a good splash. You can't really do the 3 to 5 factions of the last format because right now, even with the collated data from bot drafts, it feels so weird to go 3 to 5 factions, like having a even 3-way split for all 3 factions in your deck. But I want to hear the opinions from like John and Alex, because I normally don't splash to the third color unless I can see great fixing or like a really overpowered dumb card in packs 1 and 2.
So yeah, I mean IP's definitely I'm feeling the same things basically, right? Like obviously the pack order change is huge with how you draft. Throw all the advice we gave last week out the window for this week and for the draft open this next weekend. None of that is relevant anymore. It, theoretically, there's the same amount of fixing available in packs 2 and 3, but as far as like the seats and symbols being like 20 times boosted in the packs and all that, like as far as I could tell, I don't think they changed the rates of the fixing cards for the most part. But it doesn't feel that way in the drafts right now, so I can't exactly explain that, but that's the feeling I've been getting. So like even if I'm trying to actively go 3 or 4 colors or something, I don't know, it's just not really very viable anymore. I'm definitely back on the 2 color deck, or two, you know, 1 strong color, 2 splashes, 2 strong colors, 1 splash, anything like that. I'm kind of okay with, depending on how it shakes out. Um, the way Direwolf seems to be emphasizing this current set, they want you to even go back a little towards the 1 strong color thing, right? Like there's some strong boosted commons in packs 2 and 3 that are like double pips, like some of these inspire cards, right, that are kind of back in the packs. So I think that's the direction that they want you to go, in fact, this time around. But I still prefer kind of how we were doing it the last time the packs were in this order, where yeah, generally I just want my deck to be strong Empire of Glass cards, and usually just 2 colors, maybe splashing a third. Like that's like my average deck right now. What about you, Alex?
So I'm on the same sheet of music as Jedi would say with you guys, just for the same reasons of Empire of Glass being first. So when it was the draft pack first, we were getting a lot of fixing in that first pack, and it kind of opened up the Empire of Glass cards that you would take. But Empire of Glass doesn't really have that much fixing in it, and you just try to stay in 1 or 2 color lanes, stay as open as possible. So the fixing you're getting in packs 2 and 3 just kind of go along to help you with your power base on your 2 color deck, or flashing a couple of cards of a third color. That's what's been most successful for me so far. Granted, it was a bot pack era for there. Like it's like over now, I think. But that kind of changes everything a little bit. People are like going wild with their decks and going in random directions just because of the rares they're getting. But I think in general, it's going to be a 2 color mostly format. That's my feeling on it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, it's still early, but I definitely see it. I feel like you guys might be a little strict on it, but that's only because of the fact that we going from a format where the best cards were 4 pips or 4 influence, and then we go to a format where surprisingly every time I looked, I'm like, man, all these good cards are only 1 influence. But once again, I defer to you guys. Like I'm behind the times as usual, so I'm okay with that. I'll catch up. That's why I have this show. It's just a trick for me to get better at playing overall, so that's why I did it. But so with that, let's go ahead and start at the bottom. And starting it off, sending it back to you, Alex. What do you think is the least preferred, least favored, or worst faction to kind of base your deck around right now, and why?
I'm not really sure what the worst one is. Like with this switch up, I think it's kind of opened everything up for debate as for what the worst is. I think generally Primal is probably just considered the worst, so that might be like the most open faction at times. But yeah, I'm not too sure as what the worst is. I'm liking sticking with strong 2-color decks like Praxis or Stone Scar or pretty much
Rakano.
that, or Rakano, or
Go
even
fire.
like
Fire's the best.
Fire
Something
X
Fire.
decks.
IP had a really good Xenon deck. So like even so like that kind of threw me off too. I'm like, ooh, Xenon could be strong too. So like I haven't really seen strong Huru decks in the new meta. But you know, I haven't done super a lot of drafts. I don't know. What do
Okay,
you
fair
guys
enough.
think about that?
I don't think anything. I'm kind of down to draft any color right now. Like I don't think anything is particularly bad. Like if you asked me last week, I would have been lowest on time, I think. But I think they brought time up quite a bit with some of the draft pack changes as well as buffs to specific cards this week. So I think it's pretty well balanced, to be honest.
Okay. IP.
I have preferences, but
I think the easiest deck's gonna be Barricade Basher X.
yeah, Basher decks are. I think that's where I want to be.
Just cram in your bashers. But
All right.
there are some spells or removals that really punish basher stuff, which we're gonna tackle later in the podcast. I think.
No, let's talk about it right now.
Really, okay.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
Yeah.
one spell that really punishes players is Fatal Misstep. So usually when you're a shadow player and you have Misstep in your hand, it's better to just not play anything on 2 if you're on the draw and your opponent is fire going into turn 3, because that's usually just a basher turn. So if the opponent plays basher, then you have Fatal Misstep up. You can just Fatal Misstep. He goes down 2 cards from discarding 1 card from the basher and the basher itself. Then you mill 4 cards from him. So that's 6 for your 5 because you mill yourself as well. So that's one of those reactionary removal for basher, which I think is really good in the format.
Nice.
Okay.
So
Along
go
those
ahead.
lines, yeah, like so talking about, we like playing bashers, but yeah, you're talking about some basher counterplay there with Fatal Misstep, right? Like another very common one you see, right, are deadly units. I think I saw you do this earlier tonight, Jedi, where like, you just have like a razor bot or whatever, and you could run it down on turn 1 or whatever, but let's say you're on the draw and your opponent is fire. I for me that changes whether or not I run out that razor bot, right? Like so that's my basher answer. And if you discourage your opponent from running out their basher, then like that gives them that buys them time to deal with your like dorky deadly guy to then deploy their basher. You know what I mean? Whereas if you sandbag that deadly, who, yeah, you could get in a point or two of chip damage in the meantime, but is that really worth it when you can just get a free basher kill and 2-for-1 them? Like IP said, they have to discard when they play the basher, right? So like the majority of the time in those situations, like I would sandbag that deadly unit, whereas like I know I saw you just run it out for those that chip damage earlier, right? And like in this format, like I think the vast majority of fire players are gonna play a basher during your game. Like that's pretty common play pattern.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? I feel like there's a very close line as far as the gameplay for that. I mean, obviously, if you have multiples and you just ram it out there and like, all right, let's see if this gets there or not. So
Yeah, this obviously, like, yeah, if you have 2 deadlies in your hand, like that changes the equation, of course, right? But most of the time you don't. um, and like there's a lot of other kind of like plays like that, right? Like that involve barricade basher, right? Like if you're the basher player, let's say it's just an average game, you and your opponent both run out a 2-drop, they're both just 2/2s. you know as a general rule, if you're the basher player, you want to always be attacking into that, to attempt to kind of keep the board clean. before your opponent knows that you're going to drop this big unit, right? That would incentive, like, if they know you're going to play that big dude, they're incentivized not to trade so that they can then potentially double or triple block the big unit on a future turn. Whereas you want to just trade those units off. And then, vice versa, right? If you're not the Basher player and you think, your opponent might be playing a Basher or a similarly large unit, you may not want to trade off that early 2-drop, especially when you have like a follow-up unit that you can play in a turn or two that can just block. I mean, sometimes you just want to trade off and save damage, right? But we're talking about meta calls, right, on this kind of stuff. And I think that for people that maybe are preparing for this open, maybe haven't drafted EOG a ton, maybe just getting back into Eternal in general and want to try their hand at the open. Like, I think this is some solid, directly related to the meta advice, as opposed to just general heuristics that you can apply. I think we have a lot more of that kind of stuff to share here tonight as well. So
fair enough. Let's send it back over to you, Alex. Where are you at as far as the mono or the red menace, so to speak? Do you think that's still going to be kind of the deck to beat or the cards to look for in the draft?
It's like the most defining single card just because it's a common, I think, and it's from the newest set. Like, yeah, it's pretty much a basher's world, and you got to like bash away or try to prevent from being bashed.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Alex, but I guess we didn't mention, but the reason for the Basher resurgence is they nerfed Send to Market this week as well, right? Like the big common premier removal spell that was kind of maybe keeping all this Basher decks a little in check. So
yeah, we talked about that earlier this week. Remember when you mentioned that, and then that being a factor in making Butt Blast better card than it was before. Which it was a pretty solid removal before, but now with especially in Rakano decks with Send for Reserves at 6. Not Send for Reserves, send to Market at 6. It's you need the other ways to interact. So yeah, Laser Blast has gone up in my book for sure.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Yeah, the nerf to Send to Market, I've seen the community be 50-50. Like it, like 50% was like, oh, it was good, it was needed. The others say no, you don't need it. But I'm with the you need it because it was what John said, the premier removal, a common five cast removal. Now it's been nerfed to 6, which now is in a direct comparison to similar cards like Cut Ties or Disappear, which makes it not like in the previous formats, like 3 of in a deck. Now I can just see it 1 of in the deck or just 1 in the market. Like, you don't really need it anymore because it's so high costing that sometimes when you play it, it's not going to be that relevant anymore compared to when it was 5.
I don't know. I was definitely on the boat that I think I was fine with it on 5. Or yeah, I mean, there was still plenty of ways to access the market, and you kind of need that. There's a decent amount of powerful cards in the format that I feel like you kind of need that safety valve to kind of keep things in check. And plus, I appreciated the gameplay as far as trying to figure out like, okay, I could play my 5-drop here, but they'll have potential access to whatchamacallit next turn, Send to Market. So how do I play around that, so to speak? So I don't know. I guess I can go either way on it, but to each their own. So with that being said, what are some of the standout things that you're seeing right now, IP?
I just see every time I draft, it's just bashers. Like, that's a standout play. Everybody's trying to dip into Argent Port Valks, which I think is a bit subpar unless you have like 1 or 2 Deathwings. Praxis looks good. Rakano's really, I think, the best color faction at the moment. Could also be like any Fire X cards, but I would put the rank, it would be Rakano, then either Stone Scar and Praxis, then Skycrag as the lowest for me.
Mm-hmm. So mentioning Xenon, so where are you on Mandrakes right now? How do you feel about them?
Right now, you can make a good Mandrake list if you can get really lucky in your packs, because like it's now pack 1 EOG Empire of Glass again, so that's where the some of the more powerful Mandrakes are out. So you
Mm-hmm.
can make a good deck, and there was an insane buff to one of the most decent uncommons in the set, which is a shambling sap sucker. It came from, it was originally a 2/2 for 2. Now it became a 1/3 for 1. Those are some good stats, and the cost is very, very relevant. Aside from that, like some of the nerfs as well, some of the buffs as well, like making things cheaper, like Stakeout, a card that I deemed was unplayable in the format, now became, because it was like 2 power, then 2 power amplify 3.
Mm-hmm.
It now became 1 power amplify 3, which you can now get 2 decent amplify triggers earlier, and it'll affect the board state compared to like playing it on 8. That's really good. I think John can like attest to some of those opinions I have when I was streaming games on the Discord.
Oh yeah, I agree with those takes completely.
So yeah, I don't know about what you guys have, but like yeah, it's still strong. Stirrings is still strong. Show Dredge is one of the most played commons in the set aside from Basher.
You really need to
Uh,
focus, if you're going for that Mandrake deck, on making sure you get those Mandrake units fleshed out in packs 1 and 4, because there's some Mandrake units in 2 and 3, but they're few and far between, and like I think there's a little less support for like the Rosebloom one now, and like I think both of those big payoff ones in those packs are a little worse now, like because I think the Wretch Ravens are not 20 times boosted anymore, for example, so it's a little harder to enable those. I think they're still good, or okay at least, but you kind of shore up your other weaknesses in those packs if you're drafting Mandrakes. Whereas like some of the other factions, Soldiers and Sentinels, I think there's more actual unit support in the other packs.
Mm-hmm. All right, what's another one of your tip or trick there, John?
Sure. So I don't know, just some random tip would be like, how this in this set we have Plunder, which we all love Plunder. Now we have Pledge as well, right? They added some Pledge to the draft packs and whatnot, and so I found out, and this was a tip from Gunner, like, I guess I may have done this without realizing it before, but he like verbalized this, and I feel like I should share this one for sure. Like, if you have a Pledge and a Plunder in your opening hand, it kind of makes that decision a no-brainer, right? Like, you no longer have to pledge. Uh, if you get jammed up on power, like, it's a no-brainer to turn that Pledge unit into a sigil on a future turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you were just going to do it anyway on turn 1. So it's like, it makes it even easier to like turn some of those units into sigils. And I know some people will say never to do that. But I mean, I know none of the people on this podcast right now would say never do that. Because I don't know, like, playing your cards is how you win games of limited, right? Curving out. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very important if you want to up your win percentage. Like, I mean, I know in any given game, I'm not just gonna go by some rule like only plunder one way. Like, it all just depends, right? On the board state, on your hand, on your deck construction.
Yeah, I think that's more of an exception than it is the rule, right? Is how I would.
I'm all over the place. I will build a deck with 15 power, and I'll build a deck with 20 or whatever, and like one of those will have one plunder, one will have a it's just it just totally just depends on so much stuff. I have no actual rules personally on that, but I feel like I feel like I probably plunder away real cards more often than your average person. And watching like IP and Alex play, I know they do. And like they win a lot of games. So I don't know.
There's something to be said about playing cards. I mean, when I have to discard, I normally try to avoid discarding power because I'd rather be able to play my cards when I draw them.
Yeah.
So, Alex, where are you at as far as plunder and pledge go?
So I think I'm actually graduated a little bit on this, and John has helped me with like maybe there's a balance because like there's too much plundering and then there's like not enough. But you don't always have to plunder. Sometimes the play is just to play the unit or the relic or whatever is plundering, whatever has the ability to plunder, and you just play it without plundering. And sometimes that's the play. You know, you don't have to plunder. So it's a good decision point, I guess, in games. Plunder. I like it a lot. Yeah. No, I don't know. What do you think, IP?
It just depends on the format, right? Like in constructed, you can just plunder willy nilly because you know what cards, what number of cards you have in your deck. But like in limited, it's kind of different because oh, what can I do here? Can I win with this without this one copy of this card in my hand, or like do I need the right man at the opportune time? I mean, for me, it's still like plunder just to get your curve in, plunder to get your colors in, because you I think you really need that more than anything else. But yeah, I could see it like it's still like the same with Gunner. If you can just like if you have plunder and you have the right amount of power, you can just like keep off the pledge because you can just plunder it away just for power in the later turns. So yeah, I could go with what Gunner was saying. Like he's the world champion from of last year for draft. So I can agree to most of his points.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about your success. What kind of I mean, you've been it looks like looking at the list, I feel like you've just been jamming a lot of low curve decks, right? With a little bit of top end, but really sticking to the 2-3 slot or part of the curve. Does that sound about right, or am I just misinterpreting the signs?
It's more or less the same because like 2 and 3s are like the bread and butter of any deck or any draft deck. Like you can that's where you can see if you're at an advantage or a disadvantage in the match. If you like can curve out your 2, 3, and 4, you can go like play your 2-drop, play a 3-drop, play double 2-drop on 4, or play a 2-drop and hold the trick. Like you just right now for me, the draft form is like you just need to pressure your opponent. Pressure it like if he's in a slow mid-range value deck, you have to pressure him enough that when he plays that value card, it's not gonna affect the board that much. You're just gonna win the next turn. You can also like just grab up some of the good buff spells, like the premier buff spells, efficiency, which counts as removal, splashable, one of the most busted cards right now. You can also have bottoms up, which is I think a bit boosted in packs 2 and 3. You can also have the common side slash, which not lot of people are playing around with. Like they'll just block your basher with a 1/1, then you can just side slash to put in like 8 damage through. There's also like Shugo tactics, finest R spec, as well as what's the other card? Like I guess Mighty Strikes, but I think been it's not boosted enough compared to the previous format. I think it's now 5x instead of 10x or 20x. I forget.
I think 10. It went from 10 to 5. I think.
Yeah. So yeah, just have good enough tricks. Go for the low to ground play and just win by pressuring the opponent. Like those are one of the avenues you can do for this format.
Fair. Fair enough. And I know Alex already is staying low to the ground. There's no surprise there. John, what about you?
Yeah, I generally also build decks like that. One of my recent 7-win decks, I think I didn't have any creatures over 3. Like I had, like 2 Wormstones was my top end at 4. I think that was where my curve stopped. I think anything else higher than that was all in the market, and that's exactly where I like to be. Like that's gonna that ups your win percentage. I think the lower and more efficient your deck can be, generally speaking, while still being powerful. Obviously, you have to still be doing powerful things. I emphasize pressure and tempo in this format for winning games. Even when I'm trying to be a little tricky with my deck, I'm still just trying to curve out and apply pressure like every time.
Nice. Yeah, that's what I like doing. I mean, I'd rather get my opponent dead before they get to do stuff and things, right? So I'll take that. What's your next kind of tip or trick?
Yeah, I don't know. We can talk about markets a little bit. I don't think enough. I don't think maybe people emphasize their market enough while drafting. I know, like, I'm thinking about it the moment I'm looking at like my first pack. If that's a medium pack, I'm probably already considering a market card. Like, I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully it's a nice main deck card. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm considering my market the whole time I'm drafting, and like sometimes I'll take a good market card over like a medium playable for my deck, depending on where I am in the draft. I don't know. It seems to work out pretty good for me. Like I think most of the time, if I want a market for my deck, I can get one. I think that like my average deck in this format has at least one market access. I think most have more than one. And like I don't know, a general deck building heuristic I use, right? Like, let's say I have 2 or more ways to access the same card in a market. Like in those cases, I'll generally want, like, let's say I got a powerful, unit like a Moonstone Vanguard or something, a 5-drop, practically a bomb. A lot of times that's the exact unit that'll go in my market in that case, because having 2 or more ways to get to it means you basically have 2 more copies of it. As well as, like, we're typically talking about grafters, right? And those also buff units. So like that's a tried and true method for me in this format, right? Like if I only have one, it'll probably be main deck, but if I have like 2 or more ways to get to that very good card, it's probably going in the market. And that increases even further if one of those ways is like a Wasteland Broker, for example, in my deck. And like another thing I always consider with grafter markets is those stat buffs. Sometimes my plan will just be to buff a unit in hand, hopefully, but that's not my normal plan, right? Like I almost always will have at least one good unit to plan on grabbing when I'm going for a grafter market. I don't know, any random tips market related for you, Jedi?
No, not really. Okay. Honestly, I like I've come down a little bit on grafters. Like I still draft them, right? I'm not gonna pass them because, like you mentioned, it's free cards. You get accessibility. They come with a buff, so I think they're worth drafting. But like, I'm a little lower on building that market, just because I feel like I don't count them as 2 drops, right? You essentially, for the most part, unless you have nothing better to do, you consider them 5 drops, and you still want to have a unit in your hand to kind of capitalize on that buff. So I think there's a very interesting dynamic. But I mean, as far as like tricks, I don't think, I mean, I'm willing to consider splashing a smuggler, or not smuggler, I'm sorry, grafter, because you do it and IP does it and Alex does it, and I value your guys' opinion, but I don't think inherently I would do it on my own, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So there's that. But yeah, no, I don't quite have anything. Alex, what about you?
I was just gonna say Jedi grafters are amazing. Like, yeah, you should keep drafting those. Yeah, you put a unit in your market that you could pull and give that unit whatever the buff stats. And I often play him on 2. I don't necessarily throw him into combat. The Vine Grafter you can drop on 2. It protects itself very well. The Haste one I drop on 2 quite a bit because I like getting in for 2. But yeah, I think the Grafters are like, for me, like the thing I'm gonna miss the most when this set goes is the Grafter cycle. Just it's like a 2-drop that gives you access to your market is just amazing design, and just they're great draft cards that see a lot of constructed play too. They're just good cards.
There you have it. Heard it here first. They're bad.
Yeah, I mean,
anything that-
I like, don't run them out if you're, you know, if that card in the market is that crucial to your game plan, but run it out if you don't mind, right? That just depends. That's a situational thing. But yeah, Alex mentioned the charge one. Obviously, that one feels bad not to just run out on 2 when you can. And a lot of times, I don't know. I think people feel like that one already got value and will not spend removal sometimes on it. It seems like, I don't know. Those people are crazy, but
they also make the whatchamacallit significantly better. English Jedi. The Fate cards. You guys know which ones I'm talking about.
There's a full cycle of them. They're all the tribal Fate cards in the format. Yeah, those are typically good grafter cards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly where I want them, because then I can control when I draw them, right? So I can make sure I get that Fate trigger, and then it automatically gives you a unit for that buff as well. So I feel like it's a win-win. I could be wrong.
It's good value, but a lot of those are underwhelming units.
Yep. What can I think about Grafters? Grafters good. You can play them out on 2 unless you're afraid of losing the really, really expensive card in the market. For market, don't put any of your bombs there unless it's too expensive for your deck, or unless you have 2 ways to access the market, because it's still the same statistics. If you put your bomb there and you have 1 way of accessing it through there, isn't it better to just play it in the main deck? Like, sometimes I don't understand people like putting their bombs there with just one key way to access in the market.
Unless it's like a hard to cast bomb.
Yeah, IP mentioned like expensive. Yeah, like if it's a 7-drop, that's probably just going my market regardless.
Yep. Also, we're just discussing on playing it out on 2, like Speed Crafter. There's also a really good uncommon card in Empire of Glass that you can play it on 1. You usually don't, but if your hand can support just playing it on 1, it's really good. I'm talking about the Sneaky Auto Thread, the 1/1 for 1, which just negates or nullifies regen, and it's just a good pinger than just attacking you. That's why it's been a bit good right now, because of the nerf to send to market. At least it's 1 turn more, so you can just like kill all the opponents 1/1s and just play it out and just bash it in before you get punished by a send to market. So that's one of my takes on some of the cards that you can play early.
Okay. Yeah, I think I did that one time. I got punished for it, but I definitely see. I mean, I've lost plenty of times to people landing it. I think maybe 1 or 2 is maybe the preferred turn, just because you can kill something and it gets it kind of out of a specific range. But
if I'm playing against Justice, I like waiting until turn 3 to see if they drop a monitor, right? Because I love killing those, but
that's so much value. Like a preposterous amount of value. So good. All right.
Or Shadow with the vine grafter, or the 1-drop that gets buffed with discarding. I'm horrible with names.
The 1-drop that gets buffed with what?
What do you guys do when, like, I don't know, I see people doing this, like, when there's an auto tread in place, some people will like throw X1s in front of it, like to feed it. You guys ever see people doing that? That seems, I don't get that.
That can't be right.
I've
that's
seen
like
people doing that multiple different times now.
It
So I
might
don't
be
know.
the
I feel like I should
units they
mention that. Don't
have.
do that. Like, okay, so there is a time and a place for that, right? Like, sometimes like you don't care about the unit, or you for some reason maybe you want it to go to the void, but or you just have an answer for that auto tread, and you just want to make that opponent dump their hand and commit their whole hand, right? I guess I have done that before, but I'm talking about when you're doing it just to like hopefully make buy yourself a turn like or something. No, don't do that. But yeah, if you
Well,
have a
even
plan
then,
for the auto tread, that's a little different. No, because sometimes you do need to just bait those cards, right? Like,
but not with X1s, right? You just do it with like at least X2s to make them burn
well,
2 cards for 1.
if it's like a beckoning, maybe that's the X one I'm talking about there for the bait. But yeah, exactly. You'd throw like a random 2-drop in front of it or something to get 2 more cards, and you're like, know you're going to be able to answer it next turn. That's like an okay way to do that, I think. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Auto treads are hard to play against for sure. Hopefully
Not
your
if
deck
I'm the one
has
that has them.
early and often answers for cards like auto treads and bashers, right? Or you're just going to have a bad time in this format.
Like if someone's throwing 1/1s out, like beware of they're trying to grow it so they can vanquish it or something,
Yeah, I guess
I
that's
mean,
another reason.
that's one of the benefits of like sandbagging your auto tread a little bit as well, right? Is that you let your opponent kind of commit with regen units or X1s, and then you just drop it and like machine gun things down.
Yeah, I have to have a
Versus,
particularly like specific hand, I think, to run out my auto tread on turn 1, but I've done it like once or twice and it worked out great. But I don't know, most of the time my opponents do it, I seem to be able to answer it, but I think that's just because I have it in mind when I'm drafting. And maybe I'm mulliganing with it in mind sometimes even too. I don't even know. Maybe I'm doing it subconsciously, but um yeah, that can be a tough one.
fair enough. All right, let's probably start winding down to our last 2. It looks like on time. So, what else you got for us, John?
Sure. So I don't know. Let's just mention uh mulligans, right? Like I don't know. I don't know if I don't know what's been doing it, but I've been even going to 6 more lately and not regretting it ever. Like I don't know. It doesn't seem to affect my win rate as much as just keeping terrible bad hands or whatever. Like I don't know. My advice for that kind of thing is don't be afraid to use Eternal's redraw system because it's pretty generous. And if your deck is properly constructed, also don't be afraid to, keep a 2-power hand when you're on the draw. Trust in your deck occasionally. Like, I don't know. Um, I hear people that just don't ever push the button and things like that. And I just don't think that's right.
I like to think I mulligan fairly aggressively, and
I
I've
think,
been pretty happy with it.
yeah, I think you're a particularly good example for this, Jedi. Watching you on stream or whatever. I think you mulligan pretty well.
Yeah, because I mean, one, the shuffler makes it easy for me because I get a lot of 1-power opening hands, so that's an easy one. But I've definitely been stuck with like the 5-power hand with a 3 and 4 drop or 3 and 5 or something like that. I'm like, well, this might be better than 6. And then as soon as I draw 1 more power over that, I'm like, oh my god, I'm flooding. And then vice versa, like you had mentioned as well. I mean, there was one time where think I kept I think I kept 7 that was 3 power, but I was missing my 3rd color. And I was like, well, I got fixing and it's my main color. It's the one I have the most of, so I have the higher chance of drawing it. I just never did for that game. I just lost. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's better to play a bad game and lose than not to play a game at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd rather have my power and my influence to get me there. And if you just fall short, your opponent has, XYZ, then so to speak, but at least you got to play versus sitting there with a handful of good stuff that you can't play. So Yeah, I mulligan more aggressively. I don't know if I'm like super aggressive because I do have my fair share of reservations about getting a worse hand, but there have been plenty of times where I've mulled the 6 and I've gotten a perfectly playable hand that was better than my 2 7s. So I do think that's there. What do you think, IP?
I mean, I am just I'm how to articulate this well. I have no problem going down to 6 every time. Like if I see like even just a mediocre 7, I would still go down to 6. Like
Even on the play?
yeah, even on the play. Like there are some hands like I know what my deck can do. I know what I need my turns to become. Like there are sometimes like when I'm streaming on the Discord, like John and I was like, why did you do that? I feel like I needed a better hand. I don't think like this is good enough for what I'm planning to do on this game. It's serviceable. But yeah, like my earliest play is what turn 3 or 4. I don't think I can do it right now with how aggressive the format is, or like it also depends on who I'm sitting against. Like, oh, I'm against somebody like John Avon who likes value decks, or like uh, who's the other guy? Let me see at my friends list. Maybe somebody like Fast Cookie who also likes value decks. Like some players are also aggressive decks. So how can I beat those in mind? But it's just like it's kind of met, being on just doing meta stuff already. But yeah, I would go down if I still have like a keepable and slow 7. I would still go down to 6 or redraw to another good 7.
Like I know for me, like when I'm looking at a hand in this format, I always ask if I'm not about to be the aggressor, right? Then if if I'm looking at my sketchy hand, I'm like, do I just die to a turn 3 basher, right? Like that's like a pretty straightforward question that I ask myself anytime I'm looking at an opening hand. It's like what and if I might not have a great hand against that, it's like, well, what do I need to draw to shore this up, and what are my chances of that? Oh, well, any one of my tricks will be okay, and I have 8 in the deck or something. I don't know. Then it's like, okay, maybe this is okay to keep, but you need to shore up those early turns, or you can just get run over so quickly in this format.
Yeah, fair point. I that's the thing, and it's a joke I have on stream, but it's definitely true. Where every time I feel like my first play is on 3 and I'm on the draw, I'm like, well, this hand is slow. As long as it's not an aggressive deck, I'll be all right. And then my opponent's like turn 1 fire symbol and then play a 1-drop. I'm like, oh boy. So I hear you. I hear you. Alex, do you have any last things you'd like to throw out there before we wrap this one up?
I guess a deck to maybe look out for, and if you can get it, it's quite good. We didn't talk about it last week, but I remember we said, oh, we should have talked about it as the like relic deck. And what I mean by relic deck is Consuming Greeds and Acantha Outriders and Waystone Gates and Medibots and stuff like that. That deck is out there, and if you can build it, it's quite powerful. So just keep an eye out for that. The Consuming Greeds, unfortunately, you don't know until Pack 2 now. That was the thing before. It was like easier to do before. But if it's open to you, it's a very good deck.
Yeah, for certain. I mean, IP showed flex those muscles today on me, and then Don, I've seen you draft a couple times, and I'm not saying you're really high on greed, but you're higher on it than I think the community in general. And I mean, you've played it to some serious success, and then having access to grafters to kind of buff that 2/1 flyer, get extra value out of it, I think is very solid indeed.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of greed for sure. I think last week, a lot of times I was coming out of pack 1 with like no less than 2 greeds, and that made it easy to kind of build around. But that was last week. This is this week. They're a little harder to come by now.
Yeah, fair enough. Aptly named card.
Indeed.
All right, but
like I don't know. Like, do we want to talk at all about the format of the tournament itself or anything. Like we finally got the news on that. It's
Oh, I think we can do it if we schedule. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it now then, because I'm not sure when we're going to record next week. I know next week I want to do the 50 and 50 as kind of a crash course maybe for people that are tuning in. So let me go ahead and just load it up real quick so we can talk about it, break it down for you guys. So good point, John. Waiting to bring it up. All right, so it's going to be happening beginning on Friday, April 30th at 10 a.m. 1600 UTC, running all the way till Sunday the 2nd. What's going to happen is we're going to have 2 days of, or I guess a full day or half day of Swiss, which is from Friday to midday Saturday. You're going to be able to draft. The qualifiers will consist of 4 draft runs. Each run, a player will draft a new deck and play 7 matches with that deck, win or lose, which I really appreciate that format. I still kind of want to push Direwolf to maybe make it a special event for a week, a month, or something like that, where you could just run 7 games with the deck so you can get a feel for it instead of just trying something out, going 1-3 and not really knowing. Anywho, I digress. After the 7 matches, the player will earn their run rewards and be able to enter the event again. All players on Steam, Xbox, iOS, or Android phones and tablets can participate. The qualifiers begin once again on Friday, April 30th and end sharply on Saturday, May 1st at 2200 UTC. Of course, no one may enter the tournament or start a new game after 2200 UTC. Games in progress may be completed until 2230 UTC, at which time all scores will become finals. So essentially you can get like a game and a half in after the deadline. But of course, I recommend trying to get all your games in before that so you're not stressing over the time limit and whatnot. Players can complete their games at any time during the qualifiers after all competitors have finished their 28 matches. So that's 4 draft queues in total. The top 64 players will advance to the finals, which will take place on Sunday, the 2nd, of course. Each run has an entry cost of 450 gems or 8,750 gold. That's an odd number, but you'll figure out in a second. A total of 1,800 gems or 35,000 gold for a maximum of 4 runs, which I believe is the average price for the opens. Yes?
Yeah, it's a normal open price, but if you like look at it as a per draft basis, like with the gems, it's cheaper. Like way cheaper.
Yeah, I looked at the gold. I'm like, wait, why am I paying this much for a draft? That doesn't make sense. And then I was like, oh, okay, I got it. They're balancing it out the open price. Got it. Yeah, I saw the gems. I was like, yeah.
It's really interesting that it's like a leaderboard run thing, right? So I guess if you bomb the first one and you didn't already pay for the next 3 and you can just call it there, if you're just having a bad time or whatever. Like I think that's a neat way they did it.
Yeah. Or you could just queue up your other 3 and because you're going to get 7 games, experiment, like, hey, let's see if I could draft this deck that Herman mentioned on the last EternalJourney podcast.
Yeah, you'll get more games if those were going to be losing games, you'll get to play more and get more practice in. And I think the value is great, right? Like the prizes are good
most definitely.
Regardless and
most definitely. Plus, I mean, if they're drafting it for the same pool, right? If all the open decks are going to be saved and passed on to other open people, actually, I guess that wouldn't be fair. Never mind. Because then the first players would have bot packs. So never mind. I was going to say there was going to be a chance that, you have a higher chance of getting decent cards because everyone's trying hard. So if it's a rare legendary that's not in their, for the deck, they'll pass it. But
yeah, I imagine they're just going to be from the pool of draft packs from this week, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are trying pretty hard this week practicing for the tournament. So I'd imagine the packs will be pretty legit, right? Makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Once these bot packs are out of circulation.
A couple of things real quick for day 2, though. The finals are open to only the top 64 from the qualifiers. The top 64 players will play in a seeded single elimination bracket, which is usual. That's normal. Final matches are best of 3 games now, so it's essentially a full match for each draft, which is kind of cool, versus best of one like day one. When the finals begin, players will have 45 minutes to draft and build their decks. After this time, we will send a list of draft pools to all players. So of note, it's the draft pool, not the draft deck. So if you have one of those sneaky one-ofs, and you decide you can kind of choose whether you put it in your deck or not, and the opponent may or may not play around it based on that fact. And of course, it's best of three. You essentially have somewhat of a sideboard and switch in and out between games, I believe. No. Actually, I don't think that's right. You probably lock in your deck and that's it. Actually, let me see if it says anything else on that. Play will begin after all players have received the draft pools of the other players via email. After the tournament has progressed to the top 8, players will enter another seeded single elimination bracket. Players will again have 45 minutes to draft and build new decks. After this time, we will send the new draft pools to all players. Top 8 play will begin again after players have received the new draft pools via email. There will be a short delay between the last active game in a round and the start of the next round. All games must finish before the next round can start. And yep, that's it. So that's kind of exciting. So needless to say, 3 out of the 4 people on this podcast will draft 6 times this weekend or next weekend, which is super exciting. Yes.
So much drafting.
I know. Oh my God, it's so good.
So much drafting.
Let's go.
Yeah, so hopefully everyone gets on the up and up, and it was E-Money, right? I believe during the last limited open that had a pretty crummy day 2 deck that they drafted, right? I feel like I remember E-Money saying it.
That sounds right.
That sounds right.
Yeah. A couple other quick things there. The promo card for this open is Krull Zomic Occultist, which I think is funny. Just finished nerfing the card, and then they're gonna give it out in the promo.
So
and
then
of
you
course,
got all your refunds, and now you get fresh copies.
Yeah, true. Shoot, yeah, I guess you're right. Gosh darn it. Oh well. I think 2 of mine are premium, anyways. But anyways, I digress. Last thing too, of course, remember if you have masters in any of the, or I guess last month, you can use your token to I guess just get a premium 2 wins. That's what it is. That's right.
Yeah,
you get
first
2
run,
wins. So you start the tournament 2-0, which is nice. It's really nice, trust me. And then you get premium versions of the promo Krull.
Yeah.
So once again, this podcast is coming out, I guess today now that it's past midnight. So next weekend is when this is going on. So save your gold or get those gems ready. Because, yep, it's time to play. And the rewards. I guess we might as well tell you about the rewards real quick. So each run, so i.e. your 7 games, is 5. I'm just going to go starting from 0. If you just straight up queue and go 0-3, you get 5 packs of glass. So you essentially get... Or 07, yeah, my bad. That's right. Yeah, oh, Jesus.
It doesn't work like normal draft, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. My bad. Yeah, my bad. Good call. 0 and 7, you get 5 packs of glass, so a total of 9 packs for 450 gems. Like, that's a pretty good deal. I think that might actually be better than sealed. But going up 1 win at a time, 1 gets you 6, 2 gets you 7, 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Pretty easy progression. So if you 7-0 it, get a total of 16 packs for 450. Geez, that's a steal. But of course, the competition is going to be high. So yeah,
plus all the cards you drafted, right? Like
yeah. That's why I included the packs. That's why I said 16s, because you're getting the 12 plus the 4 you drafted.
I thought so. I was confused. My bad.
No worries. All right. So sweet. That is once again the first of the draft opens for this season and the third open of the season. So we'll see who ends up being the next Worlds competitor. They could be someone on EternalJourney. Who knows? Tune in and find out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are lucky enough to have a very special guest on the show. A friend of mine, and I'm sure no stranger to the community, already known as one of the nicest players as well as one of the most skillful. I am joined by Watchwolf92. Welcome on the show, friend.
Yeah, thanks, Jedi. I really appreciate it. I love being on podcasts, interviews, or really any place I have the mic and I'm able to talk. So I'm super stoked.
Sweet. Makes my job so much easier. Well, without further ado, man, congratulations on taking down the Open. Expedition was the format, but regardless, you came in and took it down. So great job. Congratulations. That's got to be a good feeling, right?
Yeah, definitely. So for those who might know my background in Magic, doing well in some events might not necessarily be a surprise to some, but I treasure every single moment. Even when I just made day 2, like the top 64, I still treat myself out to a good dinner, and I try to treat myself very well because I treasure all those moments. I feel very privileged to be allowed to be one of those 64 players that's playing and not just watching. So, and then to win the Open, despite only having played Eternal for a year, was just something I did not expect going into the weekend. And as we record this, it's been about a week since that's happened, and a lot of it is still pretty surreal. I'm still getting a bunch of congrats and lots of really awesome messages from the community. That's from people that I've never met before, um, feeling nice enough to reach out to me with warm words. People that I'm very well acquainted with and might have lost touch over time or have moved to other teams, and then of course the support of the people that I'm in contact with every day, especially the misplay.
That's awesome, man. That's absolutely fantastic. I still can't believe it's only been a year. I feel like it was only a couple weeks ago that you were popping into Twitch asking questions about the game and saying you're just picking it up. That is crazy.
Don't worry, I still have plenty of questions about how like ages and certain other things work, but or even day of when I decided to play this deck, I was asking Kolakoma and I'm So Bad about if Hen could hit the machinations because you pay a life for the amplify, so I wasn't sure if that counts as taking damage, similar with the down Dark Scrounger. So it's good that I premeditated those questions, but I just really wasn't sure what the answer was. The answer is you can't get machinations with either of them.
You're not wrong. Trust me. There's still to this day, I'm sitting there and I'm like, how does this work? Does anyone in Twitch chat know exactly how this interaction works? Because yeah, there's definitely stuff that isn't intuitive or maybe counterintuitive if you haven't been playing other card games or whatnot. But man, what a great guest. Already segueing into the first question. So what deck did you end up deciding on for our guest, and what brought you to that conclusion?
Yeah, so for the tournament, I played the Overloader combo, Amplifier combo, however you want to put it, but the combo deck that centers around an Overloader with Machinations and just really digging for that sort of combo and treading water for a bit until you're able to go off, draw virtually 2 of any cards in your deck, and ideally have an arbitrarily large amount of mana to be able to kill them with some 999 burn spell. So how did I end up coming to the deck? So that comes with some backstory, and maybe I can kind of peel a little bit behind the curtains of at least how I interpret the misplay works. So we're a pretty interesting team. I feel like sometimes we have a more casual vibe, but everyone's also pretty serious about the tournaments and wants to do well. So I feel like we're great because we don't have as rigid, say, schedule or decks that we force to make happen. Everyone everyone sort of branches off into whatever they feel compelled to do, and it's really interesting because you end up with a lot of different decks being explored, and we can kind of like imagine if the meta game is moving towards a certain direction, we might already be one step ahead because we have a person that's already thought about doing that. So an example here is that people might know that D-Dub's the aggro expert, so he was looking at the mono fire when that started becoming a thing, when Belax was printed. And then he ultimately ended up choosing Huru Soldiers, so I trust that that's one of the better aggressive options. Not that mono fires any slash, but kind of like weighing those. Then Colocomo kind of just goes for like really good decks. I'm So Bad is willing to explore literally everything and anything. I usually get very caught up on very niche interactions that are very appealing to me. And I also like looking for, I feel like whenever new sets come out, people try to break the new cards. And I tend to take kind of the opposite approach. I try to take the cards that were broken in the set before that, or set or two before that, and then see if there's anything new that made those cards actually like busted. So a good example was there was an ECQ where I played an Expedition, a Kilo deck with old Roland and old Backbreaker, but it had all these really interesting chains that involved Jadehorn and the Siphoner Paladin. And other than Lord Perth for that event, who I coincidentally ended up playing in the top 64, no one was playing Kilo. It was on no one's radar, but it was just because new cards came out. I think that's when, what was the set that had Roland in it? What was that called? Argent Depths, is that the name?
Yes.
Of it? Yeah. So when Argent Depths came out, everyone just wants to play with the best Argent Depths cards. So you had like the Vision mid-range decks that play Diane and Roland because those are flashy and new. But I was just like, wait, with all these new cards, Kilo just has to be busted. So I just tunneled in on that for a month and had a pretty good result there. So this time was no different, where the synergies that I thought was really good that could have been overlooked, spoiler, it wasn't, it kind of like took over the tournament, but just the Cruel Whispering Winds package, so nothing new there. But I thought the missing piece that I found was playing Xenon Life Speaker, and after playing on ladder a bit, saw a few other people doing that as well, but I'd like to think I was pretty early on in thinking of putting this in and just developing all kinds of shells. So I had a Menace shell, a Feln shell, a Mandrake shell, just everything that had those three cards in it, and just seeing what I could do, because the way Inspire works with Cruel is that you end up giving it lifesteal before you ever take the damage. So you pretty much net neutral every time you Cruel. So with all the market cards and the loops that the Menace decks set up, they have no ways to gain life, so it's actually kind of finite after a while. But here you can just chain infinitely, and I was very fascinated by that. And I probably spent maybe 2 weeks on it, but since I've had a few other priorities throughout the week, I haven't been able to play both formats, both Expedition and Throne, as much. So I played a lot of Throne in the previous season, or like the previous month, in preparation for that ECQ. And so I just started off in Bronze in Expedition, and the competition ends up having a lot more variance to it, such that you don't always play against certain types of top decks. So at the time, this was around a similar time period to when Sunny published the Savior version of Overloader combo, and this is maybe a few days after Adequate Finch and Earth's Overseer were in the finals of the Tuesday Night Eternal with the Overloader mirror. And that's when I first, like when the latest set came out, Empire of Glass, I heard from one of my friends that this combo existed, the Overloader Machinations, but it seemed weird that people thought that a 7-mana combo would be good enough for Expedition. Like, in theory, you just get run down, you could just get exploited, just didn't sound very good to me. So after that Tuesday Night Eternal, I'm fairly free to play. I won't say I'm actually, because I have put in a little bit of money, kind of, put some of the winnings back in, and, pay for some of the campaigns that I haven't been around for. But
I mean, I feel like that's still free to play if you're taking the money you won from the game, putting it back into the game.
Yeah.
So I'll say you're still free to.
All right, thanks. So I pride myself on that, so that's great. So I ended up crafting the Machinations, playing some with Earth's Overseer and Adequate Finch's deck, and I just could not win a game. I just thought the deck was unplayable and not for me at all. And then that's when I went on this Xenon Life Speaker tear. So when did things change? Call it like Wednesday before the Open. Colacom was free for some testing, and I figured we had some pretty good luck in the last event testing with each other, where he finished in, I believe it was the top 4, losing to the Boxer, and then beating me in the top 16. So, and that was one of the first events where I just jammed a ton of games against Colacoma. So we decided to just run it back, where I kind of just said that I thought this 3-card shell was just the best thing to be doing. And he was very confident that some version of Sunny's Overloader deck was just going to be the best thing to do. And he felt like it was very unfair. And Cola has a knack for finding kind of one of the best things to be doing and sticking with it. So we ended up playing a few matches, and I didn't feel like it was miserable. Like, if I played Mandrakes, sometimes you can get a few ultimates off and pressure them down, but I did feel behind, or that I would have to warp my deck quite a bit. But I tend to be, I tend to be open-minded in terms of how I help other people with their preparation. But with regards to certain ideas or concepts, I tend to be a little bit more stubborn. So I just held on to this trinity of cards and just really wanting to play this almost at any cost. So what?
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Oh, nice. I didn't even realize. Yeah, that one's for Gato Sujo. He sure loves that card. So
Shout out to the Misplay podcast.
Oh yeah, always. They're so great. So flash forward to Friday. The way I prepare for tournaments in general that are structured this way is I think there is a lot of information out there that people kind of don't fully utilize. So with of course my friends' consent, I try to spectate as many games as possible. I'm from when the tournament starts, assuming I'm not at work or busy or whatever, I just spectate every friend that's playing in the event, and I watch all the streams, sometimes multiple times. And I don't really take notes on anything, and one thing I definitely don't do is I don't leak any tech of the friend that I'm watching. That's off limits. I'm never going to make a disadvantage to my friend for having me spectate them. But shout outs to all these people that are so nice to let me do this. So I get like a really good view of just what the tournament is like on Friday, and at least lately Saturday morning as well. There have been a few ECQs where on Wednesday I just lock in a deck, and I've been working on it for a month. I know there's no way I'm not playing that. And then I usually get in on Saturday, just because if I feel a little bit stressed, I need to take more time, then I can delay it to Saturday. But anytime I'm not certain, I just want as much information at my disposal. So one thing I noticed that there was a little bit more Menace decks that I was originally expecting, and I was expecting a lot. So there was a lot of Menace decks between like the Tesseract and the deck that the super conglomerate of CSB and ET came up with. And I just didn't feel comfortable playing any of my Xenon Life Speaker builds into it. I felt like these teams must be aware that other people are going to do the same thing. And I feel like just queuing into them with pretty much an inferior deck for the mirror just wasn't a good idea. Also, one of my strengths as a Magic player is understanding, or Magic and Eternal player, is understanding roles. So one thing that I do that I think is very unintuitive is the way I build my aggressive decks is to try to think how the games play out on the draw and how I could be a control deck against other mid-range or aggro decks. And then in my control decks, I try to figure out how I can be aggressive against other control decks or mid-range decks. And when I just have a normal mid-range deck that's like down the middle, it's a little bit more difficult for me when the boards get really clogged. Like I can't comprehend very well, or I don't have like an intuitive understanding of how to play a Mandrake's Mirror with the regen shields and things dying and coming back, and it's just too much for me. I just don't want to be doing that. So
fair, yeah. Convoluted and complicated board states start rocking my brain because there's just so many different decision trees to go down. That's like, oh gosh.
Yeah, it's, and you get like some of that in limited too, but in limited you can kind of construct your deck knowing that can happen. So you can have a few flyers, or maybe some sort of spell that prevents the opponent from blocking with a few things. But you know that the board state can get clogged, and the easiest one's removal. You just kill the one thing that's stopping you from attacking. But I feel like it's kind of very built into the limited format, but unconstructed, when you have all these different axes, and combo's not always a deck that exists, but definitely existed for this event. So there's like the 4 axes, just the very aggressive decks, the more controlling decks, even though I don't feel like they were out there in full force, the mid-range decks, and then the combo decks. So pretty much it's like Saturday morning at this point. I wake up at 9 Eastern, and I always plan to queue by 12 Eastern. And I'm just taking a shower, and I do, well, like many people, I do my best thinking in the shower. And I just said to myself, yeah, I think Kolokoma is just going to be jamming this amplifier deck, and I really just don't feel comfortable with whatever I'm doing. So I'll just like watch a few games and see how it goes. Flash forward to noon, and Kola, I think, said he was like 18-6 or something. And he said maybe 2 or 3 of those losses were misplays. And at this point, I consider myself having like the Savior version I never played. And the version that we took was slightly different than what a lot of teams brought, even if they brought the Savior version. So this innovation was mostly by I'm So Bad, which was putting back in the 4 hardiness. So in the very beginning of the format, people would play 4 hardiness in their amplifier combos, but they're still very glass cannon. At that point, Grenahen and Crafty Occultist didn't exist. So now with all that stuff surrounding it, I'm So Bad felt comfortable with putting back in the hardiness, and that kind of solved a lot of the problems I was having with this being a turn 7 combo deck. If you're just marketing the overloader or marketing 1 hardiness and stuff like that, there's a lot of plays that can happen when you have multiple hardiness in your deck. A great example, like everyone knows, or I feel like most people know, that there's a turn 5 kill that can happen when the opponent taps out, where you just play Overloader, you get to play the hardiness, amplify 3 extra times, so now you have 6, and you play the Machinations. So you usually do that if the opponent shields down. What I feel like people underestimate is that hardiness allows you to go to a lower life total on your combo turn, even if you're going off on 7. So let's take the example where you go off with 7 power, and this actually happened in my top 16 match, where I was at maybe 8 or 7, and I have 7 power, and I play Overloader or Machinations, and I go down to 1, and then I'm able to find a hardiness and something else, maybe like an Overloader. And then at that point, I was still able to win, whereas the normal builds that aren't playing an abundance of hardiness tend to not be able to win without paying 9 life. And the reason why it's 9 life is because you need 18 on your Pyrotech Explosion to be able to deal the 32 damage. And then you can add 2 more life to that, so pay 11 if you want to be able to realign for it. So yeah.
Which is crazy, because that's one of my strategies for the combo deck, is like just deal as much damage to them as you can so they can't really go off with Machinations. But I mean, obviously you figured out a way around that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is actually to our advantage in open deck lists. So, excuse me. So so one thing that is very true is every event I play in, my goal is to win the event. I try not to be a slouch. I try to, even though I don't necessarily test with the deck that I'm playing that often, like in the moment, I give it my all. Because if I'm to be perfectly honest, there's nothing I'd rather be doing at any point in time than playing games. I just love games. I wish I could play it as, a full-time job and all that stuff. So pretty much when so let's say I'm playing against you, Jedi, and you have, some interaction for, say, Overloader, maybe you have Dazzle, and you're on the draw, and you maybe have, I don't know, like a draw or some 2-drop in play. I have nothing. And it's your turn 4. I have nothing in play, and I was on the play, so it's going to be my turn 5. So what are you going to do when you have like maybe some removal or Dazzle on your hand on your turn 4? Are you going to play your 3 or 4 drop? Are you going to leave it up? Like, what do you think there?
I'm terrified of combo, so I would just leave it up.
Exactly. So you might even forego playing a unit this turn, or just playing like a cheaper, less efficient unit. So then it's my turn 5. Maybe I play a Grenahen, pass the turn. All right, now it's your turn 5. I'm going to turn 6. What are you going to do now?
I'm still going to leave up Dazzle. I'll try to do whatever I can to leave up Dazzle.
Yeah, so I pretty much, and I'm glad you're playing along with me here, but I feel like that is something that a lot of people are going to do. So for fear of the turn 5 combo, once it's open deck list and you're aware that I'm playing for hardiness in my deck, you instantly need to leave up some amount of power, and I can use my power as efficiently as I want. I could just play Grenahen on 5, end of turn display it, while you're just passing with your 2 up every turn. So I get to waste your power over time. So for fear of losing earlier, I get to waste a lot of your power and just buy myself more time, which is kind of an interesting dynamic, because then eventually we get to the spot where it's just, I have 8 power, and now I'm able to just, or maybe even just 7, and I'm able to go off with Condemn up to get the technique to be able to counter your fast spell. So it's...
Yeah, that's fantastic theory. I didn't even consider that. Like, I knew about throwing off your curve, but I didn't even think about the fact that you could just spend your power willy-nilly.
Yeah, every turn.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Right. So what turns out, it's kind of funny. It's almost like the information is disadvantageous for a subset of players who they see that I have this capability. Maybe they even exploit me and see that I have like 1 or 2 of the combo pieces in my hand and they can't take all of it post-exploit. And I just get to buy so much time that sometimes your win percentage is going to be higher if you just say, hey, if you got on 5, you got it. Or maybe you can, if you're playing Condemn or Salvo, you can just leave up 1, because the hardiness combo with only 1 hardiness doesn't work if you kill the Overloader in response. So the decks that chose to play Salvo and Condemn were allowed to just leave up 1 during turns 5 and 6. And then I would have to have Overloader, 2 hardiness, and Machinations, but you probably weren't beating that anyways. Or if you were just winning all subsets of games, so it's fine, I guess. But so just kind of understanding the implications of open deck lists and how the games truly play out. And I knew that we had an edge in this tournament with how our deck was constructed, and that it would be very good for open deck lists. So, and then Cola saying that he did very well with it, and not that I thought I could pilot better than him, since I was kind of just doing it raw. And my run itself was honestly really shaky for a lot of it.
Really?
Yeah. So,
well, I mean, that's the one thing about playing combo, right? Is that you're essentially losing up until the point where you win, right?
Yeah, I more mean that. So from playing Magic, I do have experience with all sorts of archetypes and interesting combinations of cards, but there's some interactions or specific card combinations that I just wasn't as ready for with this deck. So, like for instance, I lost to the Boxer, who ended up playing a transpose to get Onerous Roa, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't deal damage. Yeah.
Right, and I was just setting up an overloader with like triple hardiness and pyrotech explosion, and I'm just like, oh, I need to kill this thing first. And I just couldn't win. Then I played against the same deck piloted by someone else, and then so I was just very proactive about condemning for a combust. That way I can kill this Roa. Turns out that they didn't mark it for Roa. They marked it for Rain of Frogs, hit my overloader, and I lost. And I was just like, oh, I guess if that's also something that can happen, I can just wait on my condemn. But I just didn't realize that some markets are playing different cards. And maybe that's slight lack of experience of the format. Maybe that's lack of experience of the deck against those types of decks. But pretty much after the 2 buys that for making Masters, I actually just went alternating win-loss 5 times in a row. So I was 5-7, which doesn't feel great, but you got to keep trucking along. And then eventually I get to the spot where I am 13-8. 13-8 still isn't great. I mean, it's better than still alternating win-loss, but not ideal. And then at this point, I had maybe 3 hours left to go. So I just spent a lot of time watching people finishing their run, more from a decompression sort of standpoint, and just getting
I think that's always healthy.
Yeah, getting more general good vibes, like happy that friends are making it into the top 64. And I was making tea, stretching, going over various I guess you could say, like, I guess you could call them de-stressing strategies, but I don't actually feel stress at these points in time. I'm a pretty low stress person as a whole. I would just say it's getting into the right headspace. Like, I just want to think as clearly as possible and not think about the previous matches. Or I also like clearing my head and thinking about what I could learn from the previous matches, like how I could have played better in a lot of these spots, and really just using that time for some introspection.
Fair. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's one of the benefits of the way Eternal has it set up, right? Like, they have, just to hit on the note you mentioned earlier, one, they've done a really good job of diversifying these formats. So the metas are pretty broad. It's hard to think about everything that everyone's packing, especially in the market. So I don't blame you sometimes for being like, oh, that's not, you kind of fall into autopilot. You're like, okay, this is what this deck typically runs. And then someone has that 1 or 2 of oddball case that you're like, oh, wait a minute, I might have to change my game plan. And then, the fact that they give us such a wide window to do all our games and you don't have to shotgun them back to back to back, it's something you'd be doing yourself a disservice to not take advantage of that extra time if you can, to make sure, like you mentioned, you're in the right headspace for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually spent an hour doing that. Then whenever I felt up for it, I queued up another match, and then I won that match. And then would pause for another 10 minutes, queued up for another match, won that match. And before I knew it, I was in top 64. So that was, pretty unexpected. It's not every day you get to virtually, pick up a deck, learn from your losses earlier in the tournament, and still be able to do well. But I guess I'm sort of no stranger to that too. Once again, for those who might not know, I spent a few years as a pro Magic player, competing in pretty much every pro tour for 3 or 4 years. I guess you could say ranked top 100 in the world, and this
Which
comes
is no small feat.
Well, this like comes off as like a humble brag, but like it's the truth. Where kind of my day-to-day life led me to a spot where I wasn't able to really practice before any of those tournaments, and those tournaments were split between limited and constructed. And one year I was actually in contention for like limited player of the year, despite never even drafting a single card of the set before the pro tour.
Wow, holy cow, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
And there's like, at this point, kind of famous, like the Sekenic limited meeting, which is where I would run the limited meeting despite not knowing more than half of the cards in the set. And the way that would kind of work is that I would kind of use my intuition of Magic and how things work in general limited terms, and I would kind of sift information past each other. So I would get a room. It reminds me of, I think it was FDR, that would have a cabinet of people that just have a ton of different viewpoints. That way he understood everything before making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
I would do something very similar where I would just gather a cast of people that have unique points of view, and I would just want to make sure everyone understood everyone else's point of view. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to understand. And by kind of mediating this process, I would learn the whole limited format from like 10 different points of view. And then I would just be in the moment, and I would kind of classify this as the top 10 things people could be doing. So while I'm, looking at what I'm being passed and what I'm trying to do, I could be like, oh, this is what person A was saying, but I should watch out for what person B meant, that it can like dry up very quickly and stuff like that. So
Gotcha.
So I would do a similar thing in Constructed, where I had an extremely good network of people that were nice enough to share deck lists with me. One of my major strengths as a card game player is tweaking mana bases, or power bases in this game, for like influence requirements,
Mm-hmm.
because there's kind of like two ends of the spectrum, and I end up in the middle, where on one side you have people that just throw power base together and then just see how it plays out, and they're like, you know what, I could use a little more fire, so I'm going to put more I don't know, Skycrag banners or whatever the flavor of the month is. And then you have people on the other side of the spectrum that say, hey, I did all this math as to what's going to end up in your opening hand, and if by turn 2 we need this, these things happen. And I think at the end of the day, doing anything too extreme on either side is wrong. I understand that a lot of people may have other opinions, and I accept that. That's okay. It's just not the way I approach deck building. I think you need a blend of the two. Like, one thing people that do too much math don't factor in is how mulliganing works. Like, certain subsets of hands can't exist because you would have mulliganed them. So then you don't actually need as much influence as you might think, because you would have mulliganed a hand that had certain subsets of power. Say like a 2-power hand with a bunch of like 4 drops, you're probably going to mulligan. So it actually just doesn't matter how your influence matters on those subsets of hands. So it's not fair to like double count. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so kind of circling back after this huge tangent. So at these pro Magic events, my first match with the deck would very often be the first round of Constructed of the Pro Tour, just like how my first round of Limited would similarly be the first round of Limited at the Pro Tour. And yeah, I was able to compete at the highest levels, beat people that play Magic full time, and be a force to be reckoned with, despite maybe spending under 10 hours to prepare for the event. And so maybe I should, once again, peel a little bit behind the curtain. Like, how did I get to this point? Am I just a genius? No. Like, I don't think I'm smarter than most other people in this game. I think the Eternal community is extremely intelligent, similar to the Magic community. And I think I have just put a lot of time into this as a kid. So freshman year and sophomore year of college, back then on Magic Online, you can play multiple matches of Magic at the same time, kind of like multi-tabling in poker. And I would play 3 tables of Magic for 60 hours a week for those 2 years of college. That's
Oh wow,
a lot of card
that's
games.
crazy.
Yeah. So I just developed a lot of like intuition, and I pretty much sort of play card games on flow. It's kind of weird to say that because there's a lot of like math involved, but that's the best way I've had to explain it. And I won't dig too much into that, but I kind of feel like I've seen a lot of what card games have to offer in the way of different variations and permutations of what can happen, that I only need maybe a few learning moments, I guess I should put them, because like sometimes some rounds play out themselves and there's not really anything to learn from it, but give me like 3 or 4 niche learning experiences with a deck and I'll just be set. So probably after maybe my 13th game, I felt like I could play this deck maybe, let's call it an 85% of a Cola coma. So, which is pretty good because I think Cola's really
they're
good.
a fantastic player. So yeah.
So yeah, I'm not necessarily recommending trying it at home, but what I will say is that, if I were to give advice to people in general, I would say, I believe it's very difficult to both prepare for a tournament and get better at the game. So I try to just do one of them at a time. Because when you're preparing for a tournament, you're trying to come up with a deck that matters. You're moving all these parts. You're trying to come up with an overall plan or strategy. But when you want to get better at the game, you're trying to like nitpick all these things that probably shouldn't be occupying your mind for building a good deck. So my advice to people would be, try to extract habits and information that could be applicable to any situation or any new set that might come out in Eternal. I feel like people take a long time to ramp up when new sets come out because they need to learn all the new cards, but there's only so many different types of designs cards can have, and I'm sure there's some repeating themes that have happened throughout Eternal that if you can leverage your experience and build good habits, you can process the information faster. And I think that's really what led to my success last weekend.
Nice. And I mean, it worked out, right? Like I get it. Combo's a very difficult deck to play. You didn't have that much. You had some reps with, but not as many. And then you came in there last minute, chose it, and you just kind of pushed through both the difficulties of a tournament as well as managing a deck. And I think, once again, I really like the perception or the theory you had as far as eating up your opponent's power. So essentially, you're doing more things per turn at no cost to you, right? You're not spending a card or any kind of cursed relic or anything at all to make that happen, with countermeasures in place to deal with that strategy. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, so I think I'm actually really glad you brought that back up. So kind of in line with what I was saying about like extracting information and like allowing this to work across other strategies in the future. Are there any other matchups that you might be able to think of that actually have a similar dynamic of like one person might be presenting something and the other person just has to respect it?
I mean, going back to that vision deck that you were talking about, when Know Thy Enemy was a big thing, depending on the kind of deck you were running, you had to definitely play around that card for sure as well.
Yeah, so the basic tit for tat strategy, or however you want to put it, of control versus aggro does the same thing. So imagine you're playing, let's take it to Throne just to make it a little bit easier. Say you're playing a low to the ground Skycrag aggro, maybe Yetis. Yetis is a little too synergistic for me. Let's say like just Skycrag aggro against maybe like an honor control deck, or maybe a vision mid-range deck that has Equalize or Shenra Speaks. So you can end up in a spot whereas the control player, you can play the Know Thy Enemy on 4 power, but one thing you're allowed to do is, if you don't do that and instead maybe play a Display of Vision on the end of turn or something like that, the opponent might not be able to contribute more to the board out of respect for the fact that you might play a board clear. So the same dynamic of wasting now the aggro player's mana can exist, or sorry, power from the control side can happen. And sometimes the aggro player can do it to the control player. So, it doesn't feel quite the same because here you kind of left up the power because I'm overloader combo and I could just kill you. And like, but you can fall behind an insurmountable amount if you don't respect certain board clear effects or the ability for the aggro deck to present more burst damage out of nowhere. So, you know, a Know Thy Enemy is great. But do you know what's better? A Know Thy Enemy where you get to leave up Send an Agent for their charge unit, or like a Desert Alchemist. Like that feels really great.
Yeah, true story. Yeah, I think it's great, man. I could talk Eternal all day because it's just so good to find out these theories and kind of improve that way, because especially those little snippets of information you can get that up your game across multiple decks and gameplay is really how you just become a better player overall.
Right.
So, and like you mentioned, it's difficult to do both, right? Get really good at a specific deck and all the interactions for that meta to win the tournament, and just get good at Eternal in general. Because, I mean, I could see the overlap, but I can also know that they're two entirely different things as well.
Yeah, but the thing I want to just hit home is that there are some similarities that you can extract between them, even though they feel very different.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, I mean, Dan, you did such a great job answering most of the questions. So, what's next for you? Because, I mean, it's still pretty early in the season. This was only the second open of the season, and you locked up your world slot, buddy. So, what's next on the plate for you?
Man, this still feels like pretty surreal every time you say it. But what's next? So, really, got to get more people in the misplay out to Worlds. I mean, right now we're outmatched 2-1 in Worlds, right? We have 2 Team Rankstar members and only 1 member of the misplay. Let's get another one up there.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not slowing down. So those of you who have me on your fantasy teams, I'm trying just as hard as I would, which once again isn't necessarily hours put in, but in the moment at the tournament, it means everything to me. I'm gonna try my hardest, and you know, it'd be cool to qualify more than once. But these are still 5Ks. Like the prize is not nothing. And
yeah, there's definitely still money to be had.
Yeah, I just love competing in card games. I have no like, there really is nothing I'd rather be doing. And yeah, I guess that's it. I'm doing exactly what I would have done if I lost the finals.
Awesome. Fair enough, man. That's fantastic. I'd probably be right there with you, to be honest with you. So I completely understand. All right, last thing before you go, so far in your year of playing Eternal, what has been your favorite deck to play, period? And if you have a favorite card.
Sure. I'll go over a favorite card first. So I'm going to break this up into minimally 2 things, but if a third thing occurs to me, I'll say it. So my favorite card when I first joined was Sparkcatcher. Really nothing special, just a 2-power 2/1 that when it dies it makes a 1/1. But I stuck it into every one of my aggressive decks. And I saw people that were playing Kato in some slightly aggressive decks, because that's when I started. It's when EOE came out. And I just didn't get it. And I even played an ECQ where I played a similar mirror where the opponent played 3 Katos and I played 3 Sparkcatchers, and they died to the 1/1s. Like, it was just
nice.
So great. Everything just traded off. They never made an 8/8. And I liked the insurance that it provided against hailstorms. One cool play pattern I was able to set up a few times was so since I understand this dynamic of like wasting power so much, I love the threats that you can commit into a hailstorm. So anything with Aegis is an obvious one, but Sparkcatcher was another one. And then so then after they do that to you, you can Thunder Wings them because you have the 1/1 left over. So I really enjoy that. So Sparkcatcher when I first started was a true delight. Nowadays, I mean, I guess, I really like the etchings. I think they're just extremely well designed. I like that they still require the one influence, so you can't just play it like you would Seek Power, where you don't need any kind of influence.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like, it's so subtle how much consistency it adds. Like, I'm just running that out on turn 1 so often just to smooth out my hand. And then, so you're like, the way the mulligan system works in Eternal, you get to mulligan into an equal distribution of the 2, 3, 4 power hands, but there are some decks that want more than 4 power, and the way you do that is by adding cards like Seek Power and Etchings.
Yeah.
But even in a more aggressively oriented mid-range deck, you can still play the Etchings in good confidence, like in good faith, because it's just almost like 1-for-1 swapping the Etchings, because you would play the Etchings and get the power and swap it out. Like 1-to-1 swap the Etchings with a card in your market, whereas cards like Salvo and Crack the Earth, like sometimes you wouldn't even care about dealing the 2 damage or the 1/1, and then you pretty much lose 2 cards to access a card in your market. With the Etchings, you only lose 1. So I think that's like really good design by Direwolf, and I really appreciate that. And then I want to sneak in my favorite card in all of Limited in Eternal, which is Siege Provisions. I have an unhealthy obsession with this card, like very much.
Me
so.
too.
Like there was this one. This one's kind of funny because pick orders for me don't always equate to like change of power level of a deck, and I'm like willing to like what's it called? Like fall on my sword. Like I'm willing to be wrong, but I still won't change. Which is, people are discussing if Mavloff Huntress, old Mavloff Huntress, or Siege Provisions changed how good, like which one changed how good your deck was on average. Like Huntress is great, you get a big unit, usually off one of their units, but I still thought the Siege Provisions was better. And I just think that it breaks up the game in a really unique way, and it's just super hard to race against this card. Like, I don't think board stalls reasonably exist if one player has Siege Provisions.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm very high on that card as well. People would tell me like, why am I drafting it so aggressively? I'm like, I'm happy having 2 in my deck. I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yeah, I've splashed it in my decks during like EOE. I just wanted it all the time. So I guess those are my top 3 cards of the different areas. And the favorite deck of all time, I think, was the other question.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. So this was when, Mother of Skies and Kilo and Vox were still in Expedition, and I was still fairly under the radar. I mean, I definitely had the misplay and the Jedi love, the eternal love from the community, but people still didn't really notice me that much on ladder. And I was able to go from gold to just like holding first for a long time with this deck that I called either Rakano Dead Kaz or Dead Kaz Rakano, whichever way you want to put it. And, slightly unorthodox name, and I love naming decks. So what the concept of this deck was, and people didn't realize this was happening until maybe like 3 days before this Expedition ECQ. The point of this deck was to play either Kira, the 2 power 2/3 that any buffs on it are permanent, so not ascending. I think it's the Prodigy, and
Yes.
and then or Verit, the one that you can mastery 6 and get a 6/7. Also 2 power 2/3, which was important because Salvo was very popular at the time. So you play these good 2-cost units, and you combo it with Wind Conjuring. And not too many people were playing Defile. Some people were playing like Vox Shells, so they had like Worthy Cause, but a lot of decks couldn't beat a permanent 6/7 on turn 3. So if you play on your Kira, it keeps the buff. If you play on your Verit, you get to turn it into the 6/7. So it was just a huge, like 2-card Monty deck that just like assemble 2 cards and try to kill them with it. So it would also play, say, Seasoned Drill Master with good with Akira, but I would also play Kozin on 3. And then you just try to mastery it right away and get the dragon and get a treasure off of it. So it had like, it packs a huge punch, but then it also produced card advantage over time, which was pretty weird. And as I kind of described earlier, since this was a very pet deck of mine that I spent a lot of time on, I built into it how to have a really good plan on the draw. So I actually devised a whole mulligan plan based on if you were going second. Like just hands that you kept were significantly different than hands you would keep going first. A lot of what allowed that to happen was Jack. Just Jack was in the new mini set at the time, and being able to discard a sigil and just forward 2 things was a good way to regain tempo on the draw. And you don't even go down on cards from doing that. But another thing was Fire was still pretty much one of the most popular factions. One thing you could set up on the draw is a lot of Fire decks could not beat, say, turn 3, either Kira or Varret, leaving up Finest Hour on the draw. So Finest Hour wasn't in your best hands on the play, but it was by far your best card on the draw. Or you could set up a turn 4, just like Kozin, leave up Finest Hour. What are you going to do? Not attack with your 2 Miloses? Like, no, you're definitely going to attack. I'm definitely going to just blow you out.
Yeah.
So where does the dead cows part come from? So I come up with a lot of weird phrasings and I guess you could call them like adages. Like the most common one my team has to put up with is like, in your bad cards deck, you just want to add more bad cards. And in your good cards deck, you want to add more good cards. And more often than not, I'm putting bad cards in my bad card deck, which it's kind of to highlight that usually bad cards mean that they're just like not good necessarily like for the rate, but they have some sort of upside to it. Maybe it's some sort of conditionality. Maybe it's the fact that they're cheaper than other cards. And if you play enough bad cards, it's really hard for your opponent to play premium removal on bad cards, and sometimes you can sneak in more damage because your cards are so bad. And you won't play many good cards in your good cards deck, because if you play your first good card and they kill it, you better follow up with another good card. The last thing you want to do is top deck a bad card and then be like, well, you don't have removal for my bad card, but my bad card's bad. So I like putting people in those situations. So the other one that I was coming up with when designing this deck was I just felt like Milos was this sacred cow of fire for people. Like, oh yeah, you got to play Jack, you got to play Milos. And I just realized it's just a 3-power, 3/3 charge, and I don't really care. And sure, Overwhelm. And I just don't care about the Firebomb, and there wasn't really many people gaining health in that format. So I realized this card just... Oh, and the worst part of Milos is that it did nothing on the draw. It was really bad in all my draw situations. Meanwhile, I can construct a deck that played cards that would work together very well on the draw. So I was just like, do you know what? Like, I've been playing Milos for a bit. I don't think it's playable. I'm going to kill this sacred cow. And then I just renamed my deck Rakano Dead Cows. And then I made everyone call it that. So
fair enough. It works though.
Yeah. And
I like the sound of it. I definitely do. I like it. I've played a variant of that deck. I don't think it was your version of it because yours sounds very resilient, but I definitely played around with it, and the deck is fun. Just getting a busted unit for 2 just always feels so good.
Yeah.
So
and that was probably my first major contribution to the team. I think it was 4 people into the top 64 with this deck. And I think it was 4 for 4. I think it was everyone who played it made it. And 1 or 2 of them never played the deck before. Like, that's how powerful it was. So I guess they really took a page out of my book if that's how it went. But ironically, I ended up going deepest in this event playing a Praxis deck I guess I just had a different, pet deck as well. But
Mhm.
the dead cows were where all my time was spent. I just, did my typical like Friday routine of scouting the meta. I just thought Praxis would do better, which ended up being the case. But yeah, it was
Nice.
definitely my favorite deck though.
Sick. All right, well, Watchwolf, I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. It's been an absolute delight having you. I think our listeners are going to really enjoy this interview. And congratulations again on making it to Worlds and taking down an Open that was no small feat.
Yeah, thanks. So if I win Worlds, so I get to come back on again?
Yeah, I pretty sure we're pretty much all going to be fighting to have you on on our shows first. So it's gonna be a toss up between the Misplay and EternalJourney, which one gets you first. So we'll see.
I mean, like honestly, being on stuff like this is worth more to me than the money. Like it's very flattering, and I really enjoy this. So that gives me a lot of motivation to try hard at Worlds. So I appreciate it.
Well, we are honored to be part of that motivation. Before you go, where can people find you at if you want to pick your brain a little bit?
Yeah, so Watchwolf92, literally everywhere you can possibly find me. I guess I don't have an Instagram, but I have a Twitter that I have been a little bit more active in. I will stream to twitch.tv once every couple months, I guess, but maybe more. I tried streaming earlier this week, and it was actually kind of a blast. But we'll see how that goes. And then I haven't uploaded anything to my YouTube, but Watchwolf92 everywhere, Discord as well.
Awesome, sweet. All right, well that will do it. Thank you again for coming on the show, buddy, and then Godspeed in Worlds and the rest of the Opens. Hopefully, you make some more cash.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope you join me.
I'll do my best. At the very least, try to avoid queuing into EternalJourney, guys. Then do me that much.
Sure, I'll try.
If I'm not in day 2. Fair enough. All right, buddy. Take care.
See ya.
All right. I think that's going to do it. IP, thank you so much again for coming on the show, friend. Really do appreciate it. And congratulations on your top 4 finish.
Thank you. I hope to get another one by next week and just get the free invite due to wildcard. I hope. Pretty please, Starwolf.
Good luck, my friend.
Thank you, Alex.
Yep. Godspeed, Alex. Now you made day 2, so now you got a top 32, bro.
We'll see. This draft thing is going to be fun. Can't wait.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. John, high hopes for you, buddy. This is what you've been waiting your whole life for, man. You've been training day in and day out for it.
I'm so ready. Let's go.
Ah. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, as always, happy gaming.
Good night.
Good night.
Good luck in your draft queues, everyone.
Bye.